Hi, I'm Justin Janetzko. I'm a former educator and chaplain for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and now mostly interested in aspects of humanism.
Hi, I'm Kris. I grew up in the Seventh-day Adventist community and enjoy challenging myself and growing through conversations.
Welcome to the Talus Slopes podcast.
If you're questioning the legitimacy of your Christian experience, you're not alone. We've been there too.
That's why we're here. We're going to call out and condemn the toxic behavior and senseless narratives perpetuated by Christians, and we'll provide credible counterpoints and bring the receipts.
Join us as we confront and weigh in on some of the craziest things Christians think, say, and do that often go unchecked.
Here on the Talus Slopes podcast.
Pastor Ted Wilson has a message for you. Oompa loompa doopa dee day. He wants to tell you why you can't be gay.
Wow, that was actually really good.
Thanks. I just made that up, actually.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. I had the idea earlier to do an Oompa Loompa song, but I didn't want to plan it. I wanted to keep it real. I wanted to keep it live, and I improv'd it.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Beautiful.
Thanks. I tried very hard. Welcome back, Miss Lopez. Is that growing on you at all, Kris?
No, I still hate it, but I just decided to not fight it anymore.
We're going to get some shirts soon.
No.
We're going to get some bumper stickers. We are back once again talking about Pastor Ted Wilson from the what church, Kris?
Seventh-day Adventist.
Okay, he is the president of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, which means he is the
top dog,
headest of all honchos. The buck stops with him, and he has decided to represent what we believe are conservative Christian ideas across the globe with this particular video. Now, again, he doesn't say that, but the messages are all the same.
Yeah.
He's decided to make this video taking a bold stand on human sexuality. As always, link is in the show notes. Go and check it out if you haven't watched this all the way through.
Oh, no,
We're
baby,
like
what are you doing?
Deceased. Go watch it, or just don't watch it and just listen to us play it.
No, that's true. That's true.
On your earbuds or your car stereo or however it is that you're listening to this right now. Mind waves.
That's creepy.
Bleep, 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 bleep.
As Seventh-day Adventists, we do not want to shame or cancel anyone. We want to point them to Jesus, who is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. And the way to experience that abundant life is described in God's Word, including in the...
Oops, I went too far.
Oopsies.
Okay, that abundant life thing that he's quoting is from the book of John, John 10, chapter 10, verse 10, specifically.
It's so nice you say it twice.
That's what they say, Kris. That's what they say. We should pull this up and read it real quick for the people.
For the people.
Okay, Kris, go ahead and read that for us.
John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full.
So this is the quote that Wilson uses to bolster his bold stand on human sexuality. I do not exactly understand what he's trying to say here.
Right? I feel like I've never heard this verse used in this context.
I definitely haven't, which is why it's caught me off guard. I thought a little bit about it, and here's the best I could come up with it. Maybe it's that conservative Christians are trying to show people who Jesus is. I mean, he even mentioned that. He's like, well, we want to point people to Jesus. Okay, I'm not sure what that has to do with the topic at hand, other than he thinks that if you are gay, you are wrong and you need Jesus, and maybe Jesus will be the completion in your life so you won't want to be gay anymore, or you'll be able to push away your gay urges.
Don't be gay, just love Jesus.
Yes, exactly. Jesus will be the fulfillment of everything you need in life, so you won't any longer need any sort of human affirmation or human affection or love.
Ah, yes. Let's put all our hope and love and trust into someone we can't see.
Is that an easy thing to do?
No.
And you know what really makes me mad is that everybody knows that.
Right.
And it's funny because I've heard many times pastors and other spiritual leaders that they'll admit that openly, like, I know it's difficult when you can't see God to believe it. It's like, yes, okay, good. You said it. Let's lean into that.
Yeah. Well, my thing is, if the Christian experience is supposed to be deny someone that is able to be here right now and to support you and to actually be there to give you that love, and, you know, even if you need like a hug or something, or you need to hear those words from another person, but you can't have that. You have to rely on someone. Like, I think that faith is beautiful and in a lot of ways. And if you believe in Jesus and have him in your back, in your corner, whatever you want to say, that's great. But if that is the only way to have someone championing you, that's not really realistic. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't really, to me, this is...
I will say it again. I've said it to people before. I still believe this. I am convinced that when Christians say that being gay is wrong and you have to deny yourself someone who will love you, it's the only case where you're asked as an individual to deny something that will heal you or give you more love without hurting anyone else.
And I just feel like that is the most frustrating thing about all of this, is because straight people, and we talked about this in the past, they will not deny themselves the physical love and affection that they desire because they think it's all good.
Everything else that you're asked to deny as a Christian would be hurting someone else. And what I mean by that, like, if you're being asked to stop lying, well, obviously lying can hurt other people. If you're asked to stop cheating on someone, obviously cheating is going to hurt someone else. But loving someone in like a relationship that's beautiful and wholesome and just, you know, love. Like, what?
Yeah, again, to me, it's getting, a lot of this is just getting so nonsensical to the point where it's like, I don't really even know why I need to address this.
Right? It's like, why is this your thought pattern? You should
what does
be
this
thinking
even
through this.
have to do with human sexuality at this point?
This has nothing to do with human sexuality.
The problem, as always, is that this is not what John 10:10 is talking about.
Right.
As usual, whenever these people are railing against the queer community, they're just taking these passages and they're abusing them. They literally have nothing to do with being gay or anything in regards to human sexuality. That's not what Jesus is talking about.
No.
Actually, if you go and you read John 10, what is Jesus talking about?
Love.
What he's always talking about.
Right? Like,
he's not... Everything that he says ultimately is going to come back to love and justice and equality.
Yes.
Equity, if you want to put it that way. Love is for everybody.
Yes.
The fact that in this case, Wilson and other conservatives are using Jesus's own words to attack specific groups of people.
Well, and to say that there's people that don't deserve love, that's just really sad to me.
Yeah, and again, going back to the whole John 10 thing, if you read this through, and we're not going to spend the time doing that, but feel free to check up on our work here.
Please do.
If you read what Jesus says, he's actually speaking apparently directly to the Pharisees here, which, if you know anything about the Pharisees, they were a conservative group of individuals to the degree that they thought the law, the keeping of the Jewish law was very important. And they had their own ways of how they did that. But Jesus's whole thing is like, hey, the interpreters of the law who have come before me, they have all interpreted in a way that they have weaponized against the very people that I'm here to help. They are thieves. They are robbers. They are there to do harm. He's talking directly to the Pharisees. At this point, I always used to think growing up that the thief was Satan.
I've definitely heard that
like,
before. But I'm over here laughing because I'm like,
I know you are.
Do you guys not see what this verse is really talking about?
No. Jesus also talks about spiritual blindness. Like, you all are
Right.
blind. So it's not.
Like, he's literally talking to religious leaders saying, hey, you're literally stealing love and joy from people.
Yes.
Don't do that.
Yes. And Jesus says, but I am the gate. So my interpretation, and we talked about this 2 weeks ago. No, actually last week with the whole spanking episode with John Piper, the idea that Jesus is redefining the law as they know it.
Yes.
But the lens through which he is seeing the law and interpreting the law is through love, which has not been done to that degree yet.
Yes.
Which is why his teachings are so revolutionary. It's pretty sad, actually.
Yeah, the fact
glad he
that
did it.
revolutionary things always seem to be about just basic love and human rights. That's really sad.
Anyways, read that through, and you'll kind of get the gist that Jesus is saying things about again
That
about
Jesus
love.
is saying things.
He is saying things.
All the things.
Yeah. So ultimately, with this whole John 10:10 thing, Kris, you and I, we think that it is important that all people get to experience true love in the way that's natural to them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, love who it is that you want to love. We're in case any conservatives want to take that to the nth degree and be like, oh, you can't just... Okay, no, that's not... We're not talking about something that has the appearance of love. The Bible actually addressed that as lust, a selfish desire. It's not necessarily even
Yes.
sexual, but it's a selfish desire. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking
Yeah.
about selfless love.
Yes. Emphasis on
That
selfless
is never
love.
a bad thing. The
Yes.
fruit of the Spirit, something that conservative Christians love to talk about and tout in their lives, says there is no law against love.
Yeah.
Okay, I think the conversation's over.
No, it should be.
To me, it is. To them, it's not. So we have to continue knocking down, swatting down all their ideas. And unfortunately, in this video, they're only going to get, I think, more desperate and unhinged.
Grasping at straws here.
Yeah, but such is life. Okay, so let's get back to the TED Talk.
TED Talk. That's actually perfect. I love that.
I'm gonna just.
I love, but I hate it.
rewind this a
Jesus
touch.
came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. And the way to experience that abundant life is described in God's Word, including in the area of human sexuality.
That's so funny because I never once in the Bible read, hey, let's address human sexuality.
No, not at all directly. There are definitely laws about sex.
Yeah, but most
that's
of
not
it's like,
sexuality. I don't think there's really should be any debate around this. I mean, even when you get back and he's going to bring up Romans 1. We'll probably get to that the next time we do a Ted Wilson video. But Romans 1 has been traditionally used to just stomp on the LGBT plus community as far as, well, this is what sex needs to look like. We're going to show you why that's not the case and why what Paul is saying there absolutely goes to respect for another human being's dignity.
yeah. You know, something my mom used to say to me that still resonates with me to this day is, I don't care so much about like what type of love is, like what type of love you're experiencing in terms of straight love or, gay, queer love, whatever. But any kind of love will have bad outcomes. Any kind can have bad situations, but there can also be good situations. So like there can be problems with gay marriage or gay love, yes, but there can also be those same exact problems with a straight relationship. So it's not so much about the type of relationship, it's about how you're having that relationship.
Yeah. And I don't know, for me, a probably more accurate way of saying that is it's more about the relationship than the love.
Well, yes, thank you. That's what I was trying to say.
True love is going to be unfailing. Like that is
Yes.
undeniable. And absolutely in all of our relationships, there are instances where we don't show true love
Yeah.
to our partners or to our friends or whoever we are in that relationship with. And I think that is what the Bible is really trying to articulate is like, again, we talked about this before. You get to make a decision every day. You may think that you are born a liar, as many conservatives believe, and that is not true. You make that choice. You make that decision.
Right.
And the Bible is pushing us, I think, is pushing all of us to understand that love is in fact a choice. That's why Jesus is trying to convince us. That's why Paul is trying to, in a lot of ways, there's some things I have issue with when it comes to Paul, but that is, I think, despite all of the craziness that's happening around us, the goal of ultimately what the Bible's supposed to be.
Yeah.
I even questioned that statement,
I
guess
mean,
I just made.
I think the point that I'm trying to make is, yes, there are going to be relationships that are not actually love. And that includes all types of straight relationships. That includes all types of queer relationships. But
Literally
we're not
any
talking about
relationship.
a relationship without love. We're talking about loving relationships.
That is what we're focused on. But let's actually put Ted Wilson's statement to the test. Again, he says the way to experience that abundant life is found in God's word, including in the area of human sexuality. Well, Kris, I don't know exactly what he's talking about there. I'm like you just mentioned, I don't know that the Bible has a lot to say about human sexuality. Why would it even? But let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say that every time the Bible talks about sex or a relationship between we'll even say a man and a woman, that it is very clear, it is very precise, and if you follow those stories and the guidelines and the laws even to a T, that you'll be straight, no pun intended, but you will be abiding by God's will.
Okay.
What do you think about that, Kris? Do you think that that is true?
I can think of several examples just off the top of my head that do not follow that specific marriage example
That are found in the Bible?
that are found in the Bible and are used, like these people who are involved in these relationships are still used as God's best.
Yeah, I mean, let's get into those, but before we do that, he refers, I'm assuming, to the Bible as God's word. So if we read the entire Bible, we will get a good idea of what God's perfect plan is for human sexuality. That is going to be problematic for him, as we're about to unpack here, unless he is simply talking about the Genesis account.
I think that's ultimately what he would say,
I think
because
that's
that's
what he
why
wants to
he
say.
brought it up earlier.
But if that's what you want to say, you got to cap it at that, because
Right.
after Genesis 1 and 2, the rest of the Bible is crazy and actually prescribes things that conservatives would never accept today.
Right? So true.
And let's actually get into some of those
Yes.
here today. We'll post this on our social media so you all can check it out. But there is a biblical marriage chart that I found on ye old interwebs not too long ago, and it's...
I think it's funny that someone put together a biblical marriage chart.
Well, someone
had to, I guess.
Somebody found some issue with some of the things that individuals were saying, particularly about we need to abide by biblical marriage principles. And this person that put this together said, say what? Biblical marriage principles? Well, what is exactly biblical marriage? And so I think that this chart is kind of funny because, number one, it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And it exposes absolute issues with the idea that biblical marriage is one man and one woman.
Well, it also, maybe this is going off and correct me if I'm reading into this weird, but like even on this chart, the relationship that is strictly a man and a woman talks about how that relationship would have been viewed in biblical time, and it's not positive.
Mm-hmm.
Like it says, wife subordinate to their husband. Interfaith marriage is forbidden. Marriage is generally arranged, not based on romantic love. And bride who could not prove her virginity was stoned to death. All of those things sound terrible.
Pretty terrible. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
I was going to say good. Shout out to Larry David. Yeah, the biblical marriage chart also suggests, or shows us, it doesn't even suggest, it shows us that marriage in the Bible also is a man and wives, plural, and concubines. You know, by the way, some of these individuals that have multiple wives and concubines are individuals like Abraham.
Yes.
Was God very upset with Abraham because he had multiple wives and concubines?
I mean, it never gets brought up as a anger point from God or a discussion.
Well, I think that maybe you can make the case that that there were definitely some negative things that came out of that. And that maybe God was, I mean, it's maybe inferred that God is displeased, but the
coming to think of it, I think the one case where Abraham was really like he did something wrong in God's eyes was when he said that his wife was his sister.
Yeah.
And that one, I think they were in Egypt.
Yeah.
Maybe. And the leader took his wife and like tried to steal her basically because he's like, oh, this is my sister.
That's what it does.
And like I feel like that was the one time God was like, hey, like what are you doing?
Yeah, I don't know. To me, like, again, there's a lot that you could read into the text, but I think what everybody would have to agree is true is that Abraham is huge in Judeo-Christian
Yes, he's a huge
lore.
Christian. Like a huge Christian. That's so funny. He's huge in Christianity is what I was trying to say. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he wasn't a Christian, but yeah, I know what you're saying. But
Yeah.
So obviously a bad guy, and God was very upset with him and didn't see any. To me, those things do not sit together.
Right.
They will not abide. Which is it? Or you continue looking at, Jacob, we know, who is later on renamed Israel, becoming the namesake of an entire nation that was considered to be God's own chosen people. Well, he disobeys, according to Ted Wilson, the Genesis 1 and 2 account. And God's just like, you know what? I'm pretty upset, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a huge nation.
Yeah, right.
Boom, roasted. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me that you could, that line of reasoning can be taken throughout the Bible. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to agree with you. I was saying this line of reasoning,
Nice.
if you actually look into this line of reasoning that, hey, we have a specific example of marriage and how it should be, and this is the only case God approves of and wants, but then throughout the Bible, his own people, his dearest people that are looked at as heroes in the Bible are not keeping this over and over and over again.
Do we dare talk about King David?
Right. Man after God's own heart.
And if you don't know anything about David had a lot of this and a lot of that. He had a lot of issues for sure. But the things that are really not ever brought up, his wives.
Right.
And I guess concubines.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Did
sure.
he have concubines?
Well, he was royalty. Concubines were typically, if I remember correctly, considered to be something that royalty would have because they were designed to just be there for, extra body warmth and extra, pleasure.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever read anything explicit about that. We know he definitely had multiple wives.
Yes.
For sure. And, even here on the chart it says David, many. He had many wives. Okay. So did God right then and there say, hey, this is not acceptable, David. This disqualifies you for being a king? Because he actually says that in the book of Deuteronomy.
What?
I feel like I'm Joe Biden. I'm not kidding around, folks. Guess what?
Stop.
David disobeyed Deuteronomy.
Wow.
Didn't seem like, practically speaking, a big deal.
Right.
God still used him in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, and it's like David gets punished for the thing with Bathsheba, but that's because he literally killed her husband to get Bathsheba, but like that's the most it's ever addressed, with their kid dying.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure how real that is to the point where, all the ancients are describing things through the supernatural.
Yes, I'm just taking the Bible.
I got you.
I'm giving
hear you.
him the benefit of the doubt in this moment.
I hear you. Sorry.
You're okay. I appreciate the pushback.
But I mean, here's what I think we're really trying to say. You have all these conservatives that are going to over and over again make the argument that polygamy is not prescriptive. In fact, it's descriptive. That God didn't want polygamy, nor did he condone polygamy Instead, the Bible is just recording what happens. It's always interesting how they use that when it's convenient for them and
That's
ignore
what I'm
it
saying.
when it's not. But
Like, of course you're applying it to something that's easy to apply it to.
right. And then they'll say, like, the examples that we just named, well, these examples, these stories are there to demonstrate the issues with polygamy as non-examples, right? So that today, in 2024, we'll look back, read about all it, particularly Solomon. That's the one that comes up all the time. Solomon took all these wives and they turned his heart away from the Lord. So don't you do that.
But
Don't you
Solomon
do
was
that.
also supposed to be the wisest person on earth, so...
Yeah, I'm not even getting into that conversation. Like,
Okay.
that's you can make that say whatever it is that you want.
That's true.
At the end of the day. But I want to get to the heart of the matter here because, again, Ted Wilson's whole idea is biblical marriage and sexuality can be described in the Bible. Well, look what the Bible is saying here. And again, are these stories? Yes, absolutely they are. Could God at any point have come up and be like, no, David, bad, and then actually addressed it right then and there if it was really that important?
Yeah. And if it was that
I don't know,
important,
maybe.
I feel like if it was that important, it would be in the Bible.
Yeah, so is it in the Bible?
No.
Because again, there's no actual evidence that God was unhappy with these individuals because of polygamy itself.
Right.
There were other things that they did, and there were natural consequences of their polygamy. But does God really get involved in giving them like an 11th commandment on that?
No.
It just doesn't exist. So if anything, again, they seem to be backed by God pretty well. Abraham, Jacob, David, these individuals at least, and others, they're even more. So for me, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, why is God so concerned about every aspect of our sexual lives, but actually refuses to put into place specific laws and then confront head on this supposed ungodly practice of polygamy in a way that he very apparently, quote unquote, very clearly addresses other such, quote unquote, sexual sins? Why do we not find that?
Because people seem to be trying to put words in God's mouth.
I'm going to go to Deuteronomy here.
Deuteronomy. Joshua,
Deuteronomy.
Judges, Ruth. Did you ever have to learn the song for all the books in the Bible?
Of course.
I remember that. I hated it because we would play it like nonstop and it would get stuck in my head. And then I'd randomly start singing about the books of the Bible. And people were like, what are you doing?
Yeah. If we go to some of these Old Testament laws that, again, supposedly talk about polygamy, it's kind of, I don't know. Look, you get to decide for yourself, dear listener,
Dear Slopey.
and Kris.
Thank you.
But read it. Because Ted Wilson would have you believe one thing without actually guiding you through what the Bible is actually saying. But that's what we want to do. I'm reading from Deuteronomy 17:17. Once again, so nice. They
say it twice.
And it's talking about rules for a king. And the whole gist here is, like, if you decide that you want a king, which apparently later on in the narrative, Israel's not supposed to have a king.
Right?
God is
Wasn't that a whole
supposed to
thing?
be their king and rule through prophets.
Yeah.
Well, okay, Deuteronomy seemed... I think the scholars think that Deuteronomy was written much later, like even after the monarchy. And so that's why they're
funny.
talking about this.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, you can check that out on your own. But it does say that the king... we only even talk about it in verse 16. The king, moreover, must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself. Naughty on the horses. Or make the people return to Egypt to get more of them. For the Lord has told you not to go back that way. Already, Rue. And then verse 17, which again, conservatives will point to and say, well, no, this is where God is actually telling us not to have. And Kris, the arguments that I've heard about this are hilarious, but let's read it first. It says, he, being the king, must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. So real quick, you will have, and I've heard this before, conservatives will say that the Bible is actually talking to all of us here because we are all kings.
What?
God has appointed us all to be kings and priests. It's like the priesthood of all
That's so
believers.
what?
That's actually an argument I've heard. And then they kind of ignore the thing about accumulating silver and gold. But I'll even say that verse 17, when it talks about taking many wives, that's not actually as clear as they would want you to believe it is. Because you know what I did?
What?
I went and I checked out, what is that actual word that's been translated to many? And here is what I found. That is the Hebrew word rabbah. I guess I'm saying that right. And it does mean many or great. It's used to describe huge amounts of a certain thing in other places where it's used, like a great multitude,
Okay.
not two.
Not two.
Or
So like a lot,
maybe
a lot, a lot,
three.
a lot.
I don't know that for sure.
Excessive.
But again, where that word is used elsewhere, you're right. It's talking about loads, like Solomon might have versus what, say, somebody like David might have, relatively speaking,
Yeah,
or
didn't
comparatively.
Solomon have like over 300 wives?
It was 700 wives and 300 concubines, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay. That's where the 300 came from.
Yeah. And
That's a lot.
well, yeah, he was a king and he was consolidating power through those relationships and all that kind of stuff.
I feel like that's important to note too, is that marriage in biblical times, especially
Very
for
different.
royalty, was also a lot more so based on political power.
That still happens today too.
Well,
not
yes.
so much here in America, not so much here in America. But it's always been used in that way to some sort of degree. That's biblical marriage. Y'all out there listening want some of that?
I mean, I'd much rather get married for love than for power.
Oh yeah, me too. Me too. That sounds like a reality show for dating. For love or power.
Oh, goodness.
Could I get both?
He just made the little emoji with the two fingers, the little pointer fingers and the thumbs up.
I did. I got shy
That
for
was
a sec.
cute.
Yeah. But yeah, getting back to Deuteronomy 17, but this is only for kings. Like, that's what Deuteronomy is saying. I don't care how you want to interpret that. If we're reading it clearly and plainly, again, as the conservatives encourage us to,
And even
talking
Ted Wilson.
Yeah. And the thing that really puts the stamp on that is later on in Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 21, verse 15. I'm going to go there real quick. Like a boss. I hate it.
Oh, goodness.
Deuteronomy 21:15 actually here does address men with more than one wife. But what is interestingly not included is a condemnation of polygamy.
Interesting.
So here's what it says. If a man has two wives and he loves one but not the other, and both bear him sons, but the firstborn is the son of the wife he does not love, when he wills his property to his sons, he must not give the rights of the firstborn to the son of the wife he loves in preference to his actual firstborn. The son of the wife he does not love. He must acknowledge the son of his unloved wife. This is very sad.
So it's basically just
Biblical
saying
marriage,
treat
Kris.
them. Yeah, it's like just saying, hey, treat your sons equally.
Yeah. Come
Actually
on
be
now.
fair.
Man with two wives. You know what it doesn't say here conveniently?
Don't have two wives,
It doesn't condemn it.
right?
Why? I mean,
Even though in this scenario, it's like literally kind of sad when you're reading it.
this certainly seems like if God is anti-polygamy, plainly and clearly, that this is a good time not to even say, well, if you have, it should say instead,
Don't do it.
not have.
Yeah.
Do not have
But it doesn't
more
say
than
that.
one wife. And it just
It
doesn't
just says
say that.
if a man has two wives.
And this is biblical marriage. And again, if you want to tie human sexuality to marriage, as Wilson seems to want to do, doesn't that have to travel to this conversation?
It should,
I think
but
it does.
it doesn't.
I think it does. Help me if I'm wrong. I think it does. Again,
No, I think
You
it
make
should
up your own
because you
mind
should
on
always
that.
keep your same line of logic to everything.
I actually did a little search for different perspectives on this whole polygamy in the Bible thing online, and I kept on seeing the same response. It's descriptive instead of prescriptive.
Easy
And,
answer.
Yeah, but God seems to be very inconsistent in punishing these apparent sins that violate the so-called prescriptive. To me, that is a problem, right?
Right?
So, which one is it?
Exactly.
I'm kind of confused, but to me, before we move on here, and we do need to move on, the bottom line is no matter what Wilson wants to say about the one man and one woman biblical marriage, the Bible seems to suggest that polygamy actually does not disqualify an individual from eternal life or even a life blessed by God. Because I think if we had Wilson in front of us right now, it would be like, so did David forfeit salvation and eternal life?
You'd say no.
Did Abraham
No.
because of their polygamy?
No.
Even though it might have been bad or maybe God didn't approve.
I'm sure the
I
conversation
don't
could come to the point where it's like, well, but polygamy is different than being gay. But like in reality, no, because you're using the way your logic works. You're saying that the Bible says that there should be one man and one woman married, and that's your line of reason for why being gay is bad. So if that's your line of reasoning, then polygamy should also be bad, and all those people should also be condemned. But if that's not the case, then you can't say that a gay relationship is bad because it's not one man and one woman.
You said it, not me.
Just saying.
You see, Proverbs 5:18 tells us, "Rejoice with the wife of your youth. Let her breasts satisfy you at all times, and always be enraptured with her love. For why should you be enraptured by an immoral woman and be embraced in the arms of a seductress?"
Kris, I am not sure what point he's trying to make with that.
It's kind of funny to me because if
Help
I was
me.
listening to this single clip alone, and I didn't know the context of what he was saying, it sounds to me like he's saying, hey, you should be satisfied with your partner. Well, yeah, I agree with that. Duh.
What does that have to do with what we're talking about with human sexuality?
I don't know. He's like, I feel like he's grasping at straws.
I have no
It's
clue.
driving me crazy.
Yeah. Do you know what this is starting to feel like to me?
What?
It feels like he's just trying to flood this conversation with words and rhetoric that he knows his audience is going to latch on to.
Yes.
So at this point, he's no longer really making any points or saying anything profound or really anything having to do with, again, his point is he's trying to discredit the queer movement within his church.
Yes.
That is what he's trying to do here. What does this have to do with that?
Nothing.
If you want to have a wife, go and have a wife. Kris, would you like a wife one day?
I mean, yeah.
Permission granted by Ted Wilson here.
That's what's also really
Problem
funny to
solved.
me. Like, it's so funny. I'm like, maybe by this definition, like me and my girlfriend one day will get married. Great. You say I have a wife? Sure, I'll have a wife. It'll be great.
Why are we arguing against him at this point? I like a wife too. I have a wife. All right. I guess we agree with him.
Oh, gosh.
Podcast over. Actually, this kind of takes me back to our last episode with John Piper and how John Piper's argument is Jesus would in fact spank a kid. And then to lead us to understand that Jesus would do this, he takes us directly to the passage where Jesus says, "And lo, I say unto thee, I would spank my children if I had them. Go and do likewise." Which is not a text at all in the Bible, which is why John Piper has to just get all these other random, pretty much unrelated texts to try to support his point.
Yeah.
I feel very much so that this is what Ted Wilson is doing as well. And what's, again, interesting is I think, like I mentioned earlier in the next episode, he is going to bring up finally a text that does talk remotely about a quote-unquote same-sex situation. But up to this point, he hasn't done that at all. He's trying to condemn it without even addressing it. He's doing the mental gymnastics roundabout, wild goose chase that to me is just very confusing.
Well, you know what really, really irks me about Christianity in general and churches is...
I have a few ideas.
I have a few ideas. This is one of the biggest things, is instead of trying so hard to prove that the Bible backs up their opinion and stating that it's an opinion or a church denomination-wide held belief, they'll just do these grasping at straw explanations and act like they prove something when they haven't, instead of being like, hey, as a church, this is what we've decided.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to state this, and if you disagree, okay, but maybe this isn't the church for you. Like, I would respect them more if they're like, hey, there's actually no evidence in the Bible, but this is our opinion as a denomination. This is what we're holding to and believing. But they don't do that.
I think that's what Wilson is trying to do without offending too many people with his
But
bold
he's
stand.
not.
But he is definitely not coming out and just saying, look.
No, he's doing gymnastics to try to prove it's the Bible.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yep, you're right.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if he came out in the beginning of this message and was like, hey, this is what I am getting from the Bible. This is what I hold to be true. This is what us as a Seventh-day Adventist denomination are saying and stating. That would be different.
Yeah.
But he's not doing that. He's just saying the Bible proves this. Let me show you why. And then is doing random stuff to get it to prove something that it doesn't.
Yeah.
That's what makes me angry.
Yeah, and you know what? He wouldn't even have to show his work if that was his belief.
Exactly.
Like, okay, that's fine. You can let us make up our own minds on whether or not we want to pursue a conversation about that.
It's ridiculous.
But really, no, you're absolutely right. It's just, why do we have 12 minutes of this video of him just kind of talking? Again, it's not even in circles. It's just all over the place. I think I used the phrase wild goose chase earlier. That's how I feel about it.
Yes.
Like what? Again, I'm like, what is going on right now? Why are you talking about enjoying your wife's breasts?
It's
What does
just
that have
weird.
to do
Like, why?
with
Why?
any of this?
Yeah.
Other than, again, he's like, well, you should have a wife and you should enjoy her breasts.
Okay, fine. I'll have a wife.
And that's probably linked to Genesis, I guess. Again, we're not saying that you can't have a wife to enjoy. Please do. And please be respectful
With
to her.
consent.
And don't cheat on her.
Yes.
Don't commit adultery, which is really what Proverbs is talking about here. Come on.
Right.
Stop taking stuff willy-nilly out of context. So nobody's saying that you should be cheating on your spouse here either. That's not the conversation. If that was the conversation, then Ted Wilson is giving some really great advice, which is in the context of that conversation.
Yes. But he's not.
But we all know he's trying to smack down the LGBTQ plus community in this.
Yeah.
And that's not even close to what Proverbs is talking about at all.
It's just crazy.
But it gets worse.
You see, in the New Testament, we read, marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled. But fornicators and adulterers God will judge. Who are fornicators and adulterers? They are those who engage in sexual acts outside a monogamous marriage between one man and one woman. You see, friends,
Same.
It's actually more than that. We talked about this last week as well with the John Piper episode where he's like talking about, what was he talking about? Discipline. And he's completely redefining discipline in what he's saying.
Yes.
Spanking is discipline. No, brother, it's not.
No, it's punishment.
Not at all. Not even close, actually. I feel the same thing is true with this. Who are fornicators and adulterers? Do those words have actual meanings in 2024, Kris?
They're a lot different from what the biblical meanings would have been.
Absolutely. But my point is, you could look those up in a dictionary and they would say something. Does that definition travel thousands of years back and still mean the same thing?
Language evolves. Like, that's something that's common. Like, language evolves over time. If you told someone in biblical times, like, oh, that's groovy, they would have no idea what you're saying.
It's got grooves in it, though.
So, like, what? Or, like, any other kind of slang. Like, slang is a great example because it changes all the time, but language evolves.
Kris, you're bad.
I'm bad? Or am I a baddie? Ooh.
Who knows? I mean, what's the difference? in like 100 years, what's the difference between a butt dial and a booty call?
That's what it's so evident, and I don't know why this never gets talked about. It drives me crazy.
Well, I think here that Ted Wilson, when he quotes that Hebrews 13, that what he wants us to do is think that the sin here is that these individuals have violated the one man, one woman model. And I don't think that's it. And I'm going to show my work right here, right now, because the sins of adultery and fornication are that they are specifically damaging to other people and violate consent.
Yes.
And again, like, sex is the vehicle, if you will, by which that occurs. But it's deeper than sex.
Yes.
It is deeper than sex. Adultery is the violation of the marriage covenant where women are property.
That's just sad.
That's not the way that Ted Wilson is using it, because here, again, in 2024 or 2023, when this was recorded, in America, that is not the dynamic.
Right.
But again, thousands of years have passed, give or take, have passed at this point. Could that word have meant something different back then to a degree? Could the culture have been different to a degree? So really, when he's talking about adultery, this is a violation of property and potentially a bloodline. We talked about this in episodes past, that it's incredibly important to protect that bloodline. That is everything. If you don't believe me, just see how genealogies are used throughout Scripture. It is the most important thing. It's not just some sexual fling. The sex is actually not the issue here. And when we're talking about fornication is hardly about love. And it's probably in this case, and I'm going to, again, show my work on this, but I think it's referring more to sex work and maybe temple prostitution, which are both oppressive because they're both slavery and anti-human practices. If you look at Hebrews 13:4, to me, hold on a second. I got to pop open this link here.
I looked up adultery and fornication while you're on pause, just out of curiosity, see what the dictionary would say today. And both of them do cite sex specifically. Like fornicate says to have sexual intercourse with someone to whom you are not married. And adultery says voluntary sexual intercourse between a married person and someone other than their lawful spouse. So according to the dictionary of today, both of these are implicitly sexual in nature.
Oh yeah, I'm not denying that. What I'm saying is that the sex is the vehicle by which something deeper occurs.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
What I'm saying?
Okay, I got it.
Yeah. So that Greek word from Hebrews 13, which has been translated to fornicators, comes from the Greek root porne, which that may sound familiar to some people today. I'm looking at Strong's Concordance on this. The definition is a fornicator. The usage is a fornicator, a man who prostitutes himself. The interesting thing when you get into like the etymology of it, and we'll provide a link for this, but it comes from the word perneo, which means to sell off.
Interesting. Okay.
And I've heard many different Christian arguments on this, like, well, when you're selling, when you are committing premarital sex, you are selling off yourself to this individual. And I think that really kind of cheapens the weight of what porne was back then, because again, it's not just the sex that is the issue here. It's everything surrounding the circumstance in which sex, once again, to me, is the vehicle. So when this is being written in Hebrews 13, this is really, I think, being addressed to men. So it's viewing the experience through the lens of a man. A man should not be uniting to another person in just a sexual way, but this is also coming at the expense of a woman who's oppressed and marginalized. She is a prostitute because of the injustices surrounding her personal experience. This is why there's an exchange of money and not just sex.
Yes.
Because the idea is I am like literally selling myself off, not in a sexual way, but I'm getting paid, or my pimp is getting paid, or the temple is getting paid in that way. And so I think that the Greek root really demonstrates that there is a literal selling going on here, which again is much deeper than just, oh, these people are having premarital sex.
Right. Well, like historically, prostitution and it happens when a lot of people are desperate and have no other means of making ends meet. Historically speaking, like in general.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not always the case, but in general, it's because of, like you said earlier, injustices surrounding whoever's experience.
Yeah, and I'll provide a few links on and to why that is true. But the historical background in which Hebrews is being written is within the Roman Empire, and prostitution was legal in Rome. So just think about how many slaves were being exploited to make money.
Yeah.
Sex with a slave back then to the Romans was actually not considered adultery, which is maybe why Hebrews uses both fornication and adultery.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because you could actually commit what the Jews would consider to be adultery, but the Romans or the Gentiles might not have, because this is also true for Greek.
Sense, yeah.
For the Greek, what I want to say, for the Greek tradition, ancient Greece, prostitution was also legal. This next time when Ted Wilson talks about the verse from Romans that Paul gives, there is a lot more to the story than just men were having sex with other men, which was, by the way, absolutely true in Rome. But what did it mean? And I'll give you a little sneak peek. If a man who was a Roman citizen had a wife and kids, cool, that was really great. He was seen as being very virtuous in that way. But also, if he had a slave, either a man or a woman or both or whatever, he could have sex with them, and that would not be considered to be adultery because that was his right
because they were property.
As a person of authority.
That's so sad.
Having sex with his property. And so when Hebrews is being written, yes, there was like obviously a Jewish audience, but you also have got to understand that you had Gentiles that had their eyes on and ears on this stuff too. So I think maybe that's why it makes appearance. I'm not sure about that. I don't actually know. All I want to say here is that the way that Ted Wilson is using fornication and adultery, he is very much thinking a sexual thing. Yeah. But when you take it back to the time period in which Hebrews, which he's quoting, was written, what you find is there are a ton more layers, and it has to do, again, sex is the vehicle. Than that. But it's really getting down to you are degrading humanity when you do these things, and these people that are being fornicated with, they do not have agency, and that's a bad thing.
Again, it brings up the common theme of the Bible, which is supposed to be fighting for injustices and loving people and helping the underprivileged.
Why aren't we talking about that with our time, Ted Wilson?
Right? Like there's bigger fish to fry. Come on.
I don't know, Kris. I don't know. I think we're done here for today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is good. Okay, so where are we at right now? Time marker on our Ted Wilson video. We're 4 minutes and 32 seconds in.
Yay!
This is going to take. Actually, I have a feeling after the next 2 minutes we'll be flying through this because it's it's the bulk of his arguments are more towards the beginning. I don't know, but Kris, you and I have dedicated to make our way through this and make ourselves respond to this video. Hopefully this is helpful to you all. If it's not, don't listen. I don't know what else to say. There are plenty of great podcasts out there you can spend your time listening to, but we do appreciate those of you that do listen. And I guess it's time for a benediction, Kris. So our benefiction, which is a benediction, which is false. Gosh. Our benediction for today is, he drinks a whiskey drink. He drinks a vodka drink. He drinks a lager drink. He drinks a cider drink. He sings the songs that remind him of the good times. He sings a song that reminds him of the better times. Don't cry for me, next door neighbor.
I don't know what to think about that.
No, again, no, down!